Jake Morrison had been a communications officer for 5 years. He worked on the human spaceship called Endeavour. His job was to talk to other ships and send messages back to Earth. It was usually boring work. Most days he checked signals and wrote reports. Nothing exciting ever happened. That changed on a Tuesday morning. Jake was drinking his coffee when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. His computer screen filled with warning messages. Something big was coming toward their solar system. The captain ran onto the bridge. Everyone looked scared. The sensors showed 30 massive ships heading straight for Earth. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their technology was far beyond what humanity could create. Jake felt his hands shake as he stared at the screen. For 3 hours, everyone on the ship waited. Earth's military scrambled to get ready. They sent every available warship to form a defensive line. But everyone knew the truth. If these aliens wanted to attack, humans could not stop them. The alien ships were too advanced and too powerful. Then something strange happened. The alien fleet stopped at the edge of the solar system. They did not attack. They did not move closer. Instead, Jake's computer received a message. It was in a language he had never seen before, but the translation program worked on it. The message was simple. The aliens wanted to talk. Earth's leaders argued for hours about what to do. Some wanted to refuse. Others said they had no choice. Finally, they decided to send a small team to meet the aliens. They would go to a neutral location in space. Jake was surprised when they chose him to be part of the team. The ambassador, a serious woman named Helen Price, explained why. Jake was calm under pressure. He understood languages and communication. Most importantly, he was good at reading people and situations. They needed someone who could pay attention to details and report what he saw. 2 days later, Jake put on his environmental suit and boarded a small shuttle. 5 other humans came with him. They were all nervous. No human had ever met an alien before. They had no idea what to expect. The shuttle flew away from the Endeavour toward the coordinates the aliens had sent. When they arrived, Jake saw something amazing. The aliens had built a small station just for this meeting. It floated in empty space, gleaming white and silver. The design was beautiful, with smooth curves and no visible seams. It looked like a work of art. Human technology seemed crude in comparison. The shuttle docked with the station. The doors opened and Jake took his first steps onto alien ground. The air was breathable. The temperature was comfortable. Soft lights illuminated the corridor. Everything was clean and perfect. It made him feel small and primitive. 2 aliens came to meet them. They were tall, much taller than humans. Their skin looked like crystal, shimmering with different colors when they moved. They had 2 arms and 2 legs like humans, but their faces were different. Their eyes were larger and seemed to glow slightly. They wore flowing clothes that changed color. One of the aliens spoke. The words came through a small device that floated near its head. The translation was perfect. The alien welcomed them and said its name was something Jake could not pronounce. It explained that they were called the Velshara. They had been watching humanity for several years. The aliens led them through the station to a large room. The wall showed images of space and stars. In the center of the room sat a woman who was clearly important. She was Velshara like the others, but something about her was different. She sat with perfect posture on a chair that looked like a throne. Her clothes were more elaborate. When she looked at the humans, Jake felt like she could see right through him. Ambassador Price stepped forward and began the formal greetings. She introduced herself and the other humans. She spoke carefully, trying to be respectful. The alien woman listened without expression. When Price finished, the woman spoke. Her voice was calm and powerful at the same time. She said her name was Lyra An. She was the Empress of the Velshara Empire. Her people controlled 300 worlds across the galaxy. They had existed for 50,000 years. She said they had come to Earth because humanity interested them. Humans had achieved space travel very quickly compared to most species. This made the Velshara curious. The Empress asked many questions about human culture and history. She wanted to know about human wars, art, science, and government. Ambassador Price answered as best she could. Jake stood quietly watching and listening. He noticed that the Empress kept looking at him. It made him uncomfortable. After an hour of discussion, the Empress suddenly asked a personal question. She looked directly at Jake and asked about human relationships. She wanted to know if humans chose their partners or if partnerships were arranged. Price seemed confused by the question but tried to explain that humans usually chose their own partners based on feelings. Then the Empress asked something even stranger. She looked at Jake again and asked if he was bonded to a partner. The other humans turned to stare at him. Jake felt his face get hot. He did not understand why the Empress was asking him this. He answered honestly that he was not married and had no partner. The Empress seemed satisfied with this answer. She sat back in her chair and smiled slightly. It was the first emotion Jake had seen on her face. She said that she found humans fascinating. Most species took millions of years to reach the stars. Humans had done it in just a few thousand years. This showed determination and creativity. The meeting continued for another hour. The Empress explained that the Velshara did not want to conquer humanity. They wanted to establish cultural exchanges and learn from each other. She suggested that humans and Velshara could benefit from cooperation. She specifically requested that Jake be assigned as a liaison officer for these exchanges. Ambassador Price agreed, though Jake could see she was confused by the request. Why would the Empress of a vast empire want a junior officer as a liaison? It did not make sense, but they could not refuse without seeming rude or suspicious. When the meeting ended, the humans returned to their shuttle. As they flew back to the Endeavor, everyone talked excitedly about what had happened. They had met aliens. They had spoken to an Empress who ruled hundreds of worlds. It was the most important moment in human history, but Jake was quiet. He kept thinking about the way the Empress had looked at him. There was something in her eyes that he did not understand. Curiosity, maybe, or interest. It made him nervous. He was just a communications officer. Why would someone so powerful pay attention to him? That night, Jake lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. His life had been simple before today. He did his job, spent time with friends, and thought about maybe settling down someday. Now everything was different. He had been chosen for something he did not understand. An alien Empress had asked if he was single. Nothing about this situation felt normal. He wondered what would happen next. The Velshara clearly had plans that involved him. But what were those plans? And why him? These questions kept him awake long into the night. He had no answers. All he knew was that his simple life was over. Whatever came next would change everything. 3 weeks later, Jake found himself living on a Velshara ship. It was the biggest vessel he had ever seen. The ship was so large that it had streets and parks inside. Thousands of Velshara lived and worked there. Jake had his own room in the diplomatic section. It was comfortable but strange. Everything was designed for people taller than him. Every day, Jake attended meetings with Velshara scholars. They asked him hundreds of questions about humans. They wanted to know about human art, music, books, and movies. They were especially interested in human history. They found it strange that humans fought so many wars, but also created beautiful things and helped each other. Jake tried to explain that humans were complicated. They could be violent and kind, selfish and generous all at the same time. The Velshara found this confusing. Their society was very organized. Everyone had a role and followed rules. They had not fought a war among themselves in thousands of years. In the evenings, Jake was often alone. He missed his friends and family. He missed Earth. The Velshara were polite but distant. They did not seem to understand jokes or casual conversation. Everything was formal and proper. Jake felt lonely in a ship full of thousands of people. One night, Jake received a message. He was invited to dinner with the Empress. He was nervous. He had not spoken to her since the first meeting. He put on his best uniform and made sure he looked presentable. When he arrived at the dining hall, he found it was not a large formal dinner. It was just him and the Empress. Empress Lyra An looked different than before. She wore simpler clothes and seemed more relaxed. She gestured for Jake to sit. The table was set with food from both cultures. There were human dishes and Velshara dishes. The Empress explained that she wanted to learn about human food and customs. During the meal, the Empress asked Jake personal questions. She wanted to know about his childhood, his family, and his dreams. Jake was surprised by her interest. He told her about growing up on a small colony world where people worked hard just to survive. He explained that he joined the military to see new places and help humanity explore the stars. The Empress listened carefully to everything he said. Then she asked him about love. She wanted to understand why humans chose partners based on feelings instead of logic. In Velshara culture, Partnerships were arranged to combine good genetics and political advantages. The idea of choosing based on emotion was foreign to her, Jake tried to explain. He said that humans believed love made life meaningful. Having someone who cared about you, who you could trust completely, was one of the most important things in life. Money and power were nice, but they were empty without someone to share them with. The Empress seemed to find this idea both strange and interesting. Before Jake could ask his own questions, an urgent message interrupted them. A Velshara colony on the edge of the Empire was under attack. A hostile species called the Krythax had destroyed several stations. The Empress had to respond immediately. She apologized to Jake and left quickly. The next day, the ship changed course. They were heading to the battle zone. Jake was told he could observe from the command center. He wanted to understand how the Velshara fought. When they arrived, Jake saw the Krythax ships. They were ugly and brutal looking, covered in weapons. The battle was not what Jake expected. The Velshara had overwhelming power. Their weapons could destroy enemy ships from incredible distances. They moved in perfect formations and followed precise strategies. Within hours, the Krythax fleet was defeated. But Jake noticed something troubling. The Velshara fought like a machine. They followed their plan exactly, even when the enemy did unexpected things. A few times the Krythax tried surprise tactics. The Velshara won anyway because of superior technology, but they did not adapt their strategy. They just kept following the original plan. After the battle, Jake mentioned this to a Velshara officer named Commander Tannerel. The officer seemed uncomfortable with the observation. He admitted that the Velshara had not faced a real challenge in a very long time. Their technology was so advanced that they rarely needed to change tactics. They had become very good at following plans, but not at creating new ones quickly. That evening, Jake was surprised to receive another invitation from the Empress. This time she asked him to meet her in her private observation room. It was a beautiful space with large windows showing the stars. The Empress stood alone, looking out at space. She turned when Jake entered. She looked tired. For the first time, Jake saw her not as a powerful ruler, but as a person with heavy responsibilities. She asked him to sit and then said something that shocked him. She told him the real reason the Velshara had come to Earth. The Empress explained that a terrible threat was coming. Something from beyond the known galaxy was destroying civilizations. The Velshara called it the Void Convergence. It had already wiped out several ancient species. The Velshara had tried to fight it, but their traditional methods did not work. Nothing they did could stop it or even slow it down. The Empress said that she had studied humanity carefully before making contact. She saw that humans were different from most species. Humans adapted quickly to new situations. They found creative solutions to problems. They did not give up even when things seemed hopeless. The Empress believed humanity might have the kind of thinking needed to fight the Void Convergence. Jake felt overwhelmed. She was asking if humanity could help save the galaxy, but humans were so primitive compared to the Velshara. If the mighty Empire could not stop this threat, what could humans do? He said this out loud. The Empress smiled sadly. She explained that power was not everything. The Velshara had become strong by being methodical and careful. But this also made them rigid. They had forgotten how to think in new ways. Humanity was young and still learning. This meant humans had not become set in their ways. They could see possibilities that the Velshara could not imagine. Jake asked why she was telling him this instead of Earth's leaders. The Empress looked at him for a long moment. She said that leaders often made decisions based on politics and fear. She needed someone who could think clearly and honestly, someone who understood both the Empire and humanity. She believed Jake was that person. Then she said something else. She admitted that her interest in Jake was not purely strategic. She found him interesting as a person. In her long life, she had met thousands of officials and diplomats. They all wanted something from her. They treated her as a symbol of power, not as an individual. But Jake talked to her like she was a normal person. This was rare and valuable to her. Jake did not know what to say. He felt confused and overwhelmed. The fate of the galaxy might depend on humanity. An alien Empress was confessing personal feelings to him. It was too much. He asked for time to think. The Empress nodded and told him to rest. They would talk more tomorrow. That night, Jake could not sleep. He thought about everything the Empress had told him. He thought about the threat coming to destroy everything. He thought about her words and the way she had looked at him. He realized his life would never be simple again. The universe had become much bigger and more dangerous than he ever imagined. Jake returned to Earth 3 days later. He had to brief humanity's leaders about the void convergence. When he explained the threat, the room fell silent. Then everyone started talking at once. Some people were scared. Others were angry that the Velshara had not told them sooner. A few thought it was a trick to make humanity submit to the Empire. Jake spent hours answering questions and showing the data the Velshara had shared. The evidence was clear. Something terrible was coming, and it would reach human space within a year. Earth's president, an older man named Carl Hayes, finally called for order. He asked Jake what he thought humanity should do. Jake spoke honestly. He said humanity had 2 choices. They could hide and hope the threat passed them by, or they could work with the Velshara to find a solution. Hiding would not work. The void convergence had already destroyed civilizations more advanced than humans. The only chance was cooperation. Humanity could contribute their creative thinking, while the Velshara provided technology and resources. The debate lasted for days. Politicians argued about terms and conditions. Military leaders worried about becoming dependent on alien technology. Scientists wanted to study the threat immediately. Finally, they reached a decision. Humanity would form an alliance with the Velshara Empire. They would work together to stop the void convergence. 2 weeks later, Empress Lyra came to Earth. It was the first time a Velshara had visited the human homeworld. Billions of people watched as her ship landed. Security was massive. Everyone was nervous. This meeting would determine humanity's future. Jake was assigned to escort the Empress during her visit. He met her at the landing site. She looked around at Earth with genuine interest. She commented that it was a beautiful world, still young and full of life. Many worlds in the Empire had been developed for so long that they had lost their natural beauty. The signing ceremony was held at the United Nations building. Leaders from every human nation attended. The Empress gave a speech that was broadcast to every device on Earth. She spoke about the threat facing the galaxy and praised human courage in choosing to fight rather than hide. She said the Velshara Empire did not want to rule humanity. They wanted humanity as partners and friends. Her words were carefully chosen and diplomatic. But Jake noticed something in her voice when she talked about humanity's potential. There was genuine respect there. She truly believed humans could make a difference. This surprised many people who had expected the Empire to treat humanity like children. After the ceremony, the Empress requested time away from the crowds and cameras. She asked Jake to show her some of Earth's natural places. They flew to a national park in the mountains. Security followed at a distance, but the Empress and Jake walked alone on a forest trail. For the first time, they could talk freely without the pressure of their official roles. The Empress seemed more relaxed than Jake had ever seen her. She asked him about the trees and animals. She was fascinated by how wild and unpredictable Earth's nature was. On most Velshara worlds, nature was carefully managed and controlled. They sat by a stream, and the Empress surprised Jake by removing her formal outer robe. Underneath, she wore simpler clothes. She told him that being an Empress was exhausting. Every moment was watched and judged. Every word had to be perfect. She rarely got to just be herself. But here, on this alien world with no Velshara watching, she could relax a little. Jake understood. He said that being chosen as humanity's representative was similar. Everyone expected him to be perfect and make no mistakes. The weight of it kept him awake at night. The Empress looked at him with understanding. She said that leadership was lonely. No one else could truly understand the pressure except someone who carried similar responsibilities. Then the Empress said something that made Jake's heart race. She told him that in Velshara tradition, important alliances were often sealed through partnerships between leaders. She said that a union between them could symbolize the alliance between their peoples. But she wanted him to know this was not just political calculation. She had developed genuine feelings for him. Jake did not know how to respond. Part of him was flattered and even excited. The Empress was intelligent, powerful, and surprisingly kind when away from her formal duties. But this was too big. If he agreed, it would affect billions of lives. People might think he was betraying humanity or being used by the Empire. His personal feelings became tangled with his responsibilities. He told her honestly that he was confused and scared. He asked how she could be sure her feelings were real. They had spent so little time together and the circumstances were so unusual. Maybe she just admired what humanity represented rather than caring about him specifically. The Empress smiled. She said that in her long life, she had met thousands of impressive people. She had admired many leaders and warriors and scholars. But Jake was different. He treated her like a person, not a symbol. He was honest, even when it would be easier to say what she wanted to hear. He made her think about things in new ways. These qualities were rare and valuable. Jake admitted that he felt drawn to her too. He found her fascinating, but he needed time to think about what this would mean. The Empress nodded. She said she would not pressure him. This decision had to be his own. Whatever he chose, they would remain allies and friends. They walked back toward the landing site in comfortable silence. Jake felt both relieved and uncertain. He had more questions than answers. But before they could discuss anything further, Jake's communication device beeped urgently. It was an emergency message from Velshara Space Command. The void convergence had been detected. It was closer than anyone thought possible. A Velshara research station on the edge of the Empire had just been destroyed. The station's last transmission showed the convergence moving faster than previous observations suggested. It would reach populated space in 3 months, not a year. The Empress's face became serious. She immediately contacted her command staff and ordered them to begin mobilizing the fleet. She turned to Jake and said they needed to return to space immediately. There was no more time for personal matters. The survival of both their civilizations depended on what they did in the next few months. Jake nodded. He felt his personal confusion fade as the larger crisis took over. Whatever his feelings about the Empress, they had a job to do. They had to find a way to stop the void convergence. Everything else could wait. As they flew back to the capital, Jake looked out the window at Earth. His home world looked peaceful and beautiful from the air. But somewhere beyond the stars, a force of destruction was coming. He wondered if he would ever see Earth looking so peaceful again. The real fight was about to begin, and nobody knew if they could win. The combined human and Velshara fleet gathered at the edge of known space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy. Hundreds of Velshara warships floated alongside dozens of human vessels. The human ships looked small and crude next to the elegant alien craft, but they were there, ready to fight. Jake stood on the bridge of the command ship. Around him, officers from both species worked together to coordinate the defense. It was chaos at first. Humans and Velshara had different ways of communicating and organizing, but slowly they learned to work as one team. The Empress had put Jake in charge of tactical coordination. Many Velshara officers were unhappy about this. They did not understand why a human with no military command experience should have such authority. But the Empress insisted. She said they needed someone who could think differently, someone not bound by traditional tactics. Jake had spent weeks studying the void convergence data. He worked with scientists from both species, trying to understand what they were facing. The convergence was not a weapon or a creature. It was something else. A wave of destruction that broke down organized matter into chaos. Normal weapons passed through it without effect. The Velshara's strategy was to hit the convergence with overwhelming firepower. They believed that enough concentrated energy would disrupt it. Jake disagreed. He had a different idea, one that seemed crazy to most of the Velshara commanders. Instead of fighting the convergence, he wanted to redirect it. Jake explained his theory. The convergence seemed to seek out organized complexity. It moved toward planets and structures, avoiding empty space. What if they could give it something else to focus on? Something that satisfied its need for disorder without destroying inhabited worlds? Human scientists had developed devices that could create controlled pockets of quantum chaos. These fields would contain pure randomness and disorder. Jake's plan was to place these devices in the convergence's path, creating a trail of chaos leading away from populated space. The Velshara would use their gravity technology to help channel the convergence in the right direction. Many Velshara officers thought the plan was foolish. Commander Tainerl argued that they should stick to proven military tactics. Fighting the unknown with experimental technology was too risky. But Empress Lyra supported Jake's approach. She reminded her officers that proven tactics had failed against the convergence before. This was their chance to try something new. When the void convergence arrived, it was more terrifying than Jake had imagined. Space itself seemed to tear and twist in its presence. Stars disappeared behind waves of distortion. The first ships that got too close simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. They were just gone. Jake gave the order to begin. Human ships moved forward, deploying the chaos generators. These small devices began creating fields of pure disorder, tiny pockets of controlled randomness in space. Behind them, massive Velshara ships positioned themselves in a network, ready to create gravitational channels. At first, nothing happened. The convergence continued its relentless advance. Ships fled before it. 3 more vessels were caught by the edge of the distortion and vanished. Fear spread through the fleet. Jake's plan was not working. Some officers demanded they retreat immediately, but Jake noticed something on the sensors. The convergence was moving slightly slower. Not much, but measurable. He ordered the human ships to increase the output of their chaos generators, pushing the technology beyond its safe limits. Several devices overloaded and exploded, but the remaining ones burned brighter, creating larger fields of disorder. The change was subtle at first. The convergence's path began to curve just slightly toward the artificial chaos fields. Jake felt hope surge through him. It was working. The convergence was attracted to the disorder they were creating. He ordered more generators deployed and asked the Velshara to increase their gravitational pull. For 3 days, the combined fleet worked without rest. Human crews constantly adjusted the chaos generators, responding to the convergence's movements. Velshara ships maintained the gravitational network, creating invisible channels in space. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Ships had to stay close to the convergence to be effective, risking destruction if they miscalculated. Jake barely slept during this time. He stood on the bridge, monitoring every change, making constant adjustments to the plan. The Empress stayed with him, offering support and making decisions when needed. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's thoughts and actions. On the 4th day, the breakthrough came. The convergence fully changed direction. Instead of heading toward the inhabited systems, it turned and followed the trail of chaos generators toward empty space. The strategy was working. They were successfully redirecting the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. But the work was not finished. They had to maintain the chaos trail for weeks, leading the convergence far from any populated areas. It required constant effort and coordination. Human ingenuity and Velshara resources worked together perfectly. Neither species could have done it alone. As the convergence moved away from danger, Jake finally allowed himself to feel relief. They had done it. The fleet had saved countless lives across multiple civilizations. He looked at the Empress, who was watching the sensor displays with satisfaction. She turned to him and smiled, a genuine expression of joy and pride. The Velshara officers who had doubted Jake's plan now looked at him with respect. He had proven that humans could contribute something valuable to the galaxy. Commander Tainerl approached Jake and formally apologized for his earlier skepticism. He said that Jake had taught them an important lesson about the value of thinking differently. That night, Jake finally got some rest. He lay in his quarters, feeling the exhaustion in every muscle. But he also felt proud. Humanity had proven itself. They had shown that being young and less advanced did not mean being useless. Creative thinking and determination had value that could not be measured in technology or firepower. The Empress visited him later. She sat beside his bed and took his hand. She told him that he had done something remarkable. He had not only saved millions of lives, but had also changed how the Velshara viewed themselves and others. The Empire would never be the same after this. They had learned to value adaptability as much as power. Jake squeezed her hand. He realized that during the crisis, his doubts about their relationship had faded. Working together under such pressure had shown him who she really was. She was not just an Empress, but a person who cared deeply about protecting others. She had trusted him completely when others doubted. That trust meant everything. He told her that he had made his decision. If she still wanted him, he would accept her partnership. Not because of politics or duty, but because he had genuine feelings for her. She smiled, and for the first time he saw tears in her eyes. She said that was all she had wanted to hear. 6 months after the crisis, a permanent research station was built to monitor the void convergence. The station floated in deep space, far from any inhabited worlds. Its purpose was to maintain the network of chaos generators and study the convergence to prevent future threats. Jake was appointed as the co-director of the facility. Working with him was Commander Tainerl, the Velshara officer who had once doubted him. They had become friends during the crisis. Tanneril admitted that meeting humans had changed his perspective on many things. He had learned that age and experience were not the same as wisdom. The station was home to both human and Velshara scientists. At first, the two groups kept to themselves, but gradually they began to mix. Humans and Velshara ate meals together, shared stories, and formed friendships. It was a small example of what the larger alliance could become. Empress Lyra visited the station regularly. Officially, she came to review their progress. But everyone knew she also came to spend time with Jake. Their relationship had become public knowledge. The reactions across both civilizations were mixed, but most people accepted it as a symbol of the growing bond between humans and Velshara. During one visit, the Empress surprised Jake by announcing she was taking a leave of absence from her formal duties. She would stay at the station for several months as a researcher, not as an Empress. Her advisors had argued against this, but she insisted. She wanted time to be herself, away from the constant pressure of ruling an empire. Those months were the happiest Jake had known. He and Lyra worked together during the day, studying the convergence and managing the station. In the evenings, they talked, shared meals, and explored their growing feelings for each other. She showed him Velshara music and poetry. He introduced her to human movies and books. Lyra was different away from her formal role. She laughed more easily. She asked questions about everything. She was curious and playful in ways that surprised Jake. He realized that she had been wearing a mask her whole life, showing the world what an Empress should be, rather than who she really was. Jake found himself falling deeply in love with her. Not with the powerful Empress who ruled hundreds of worlds, but with the person who liked to watch the stars and wondered about the meaning of existence. She was brilliant and kind, strong but vulnerable. She understood his fears and doubts because she had her own. News of their relationship reached Earth and caused debate. Some people celebrated it as proof of humanity's acceptance among the stars. Others worried that Jake was being manipulated or that humanity would lose its independence. Jake's own family had mixed feelings. His mother was proud but concerned. His brother thought he was crazy. Among the Velshara, there was also controversy. Some traditionalists argued that the Empress should partner with another Velshara of high status. They said that partnering with a human from such a young species diminished the Empire's prestige. But many others, especially younger Velshara, saw it as a positive change. The Empire had become too rigid and needed new perspectives. The Empress addressed these concerns directly in a public broadcast. She spoke to both civilizations, explaining her choice. She said that the strength of the Velshara had always been their ability to recognize value in all forms. Humanity had proven their worth by saving the galaxy when the Empire's traditional methods failed. Jake specifically had shown courage, creativity, and integrity. She continued by saying that her choice of partner was both personal and symbolic. Personally, she had found in Jake something she had never expected to find. Someone who saw her as a person rather than a position. Someone she could trust completely. Symbolically, their partnership represented the alliance between their peoples, a joining of different strengths to create something greater. Jake also made a statement to humanity. He spoke from the research station, with Earth visible in the background on the monitors. He said he understood people's concerns. He was still human and still loyal to Earth, but he believed that humanity's future was not in isolation. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers. Humanity needed allies and friends. He explained that his relationship with Lyra had taught him that differences could be strengths. Humans and Velshara thought differently and valued different things, but these differences complemented each other. Together, they could achieve things neither could do alone. This was not about one species dominating another, but about genuine partnership. A year after the Void Convergence crisis, a ceremony was held to formally recognize the partnership between Jake and Lyra. It was not a traditional wedding by human or Velshara standards. Instead, it blended customs from both cultures, creating something new. Representatives from hundreds of species attended, witnessing what many called the beginning of a new era. The ceremony took place on the research station, with the swirling energies of the managed void convergence visible through the large observation windows. The location was chosen deliberately. It represented how a deadly threat had been transformed into an opportunity for cooperation and growth. Jake wore a uniform that combined human and Velshara elements. Lyra An wore traditional Empress robes but in colors that honored both cultures. They spoke vows they had written together, promising to support each other and to work for the benefit of both their peoples. There was no mention of dominance or submission, only partnership and mutual respect. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted for hours. Humans and Velshara mixed freely, sharing food and stories. Music from both cultures filled the station. It was chaotic and wonderful, nothing like the formal Velshara ceremonies or traditional human weddings. It was something entirely new. Late that night, Jake and Lyra An stood together in the observation room. The party continued in other parts of the station, but they had slipped away for a moment alone. They looked out at the convergence, that beautiful and terrible force that had brought them together. Lyra An asked Jake if he had any regrets. He thought about the question seriously. His life had changed completely from what he had imagined. He was bonded to an alien Empress. He represented his entire species. He lived on a research station instead of Earth. The responsibility was enormous and never-ending, but he had no regrets. He had found purpose and love in the most unlikely place. He had helped save billions of lives. He had been part of something bigger than himself. Most importantly, he had found someone who understood him completely, someone he could face the universe with. Lyra An smiled and took his hand. She said that meeting humanity and Jake had reminded her empire of something important. Power and technology were valuable, but they were not everything. Creativity, adaptability, and the courage to change were equally important. The Velshara had forgotten this after millennia of dominance. Humanity had helped them remember. They stood in comfortable silence watching the stars. The future held many challenges. The void convergence required constant management. The alliance between their civilizations needed ongoing work. There would be more threats and problems to solve, but they would face these challenges together. Jake realized that the Empress's question at their first meeting had been answered. She had asked if he was single, and that simple question had led to all of this, a partnership that changed both their lives, an alliance that saved the galaxy, a new way forward for both their peoples. As they turned to rejoin the celebration, Jake felt optimistic about the future. Humanity had proven they belonged among the stars. They had earned respect, not through conquest but through contribution. They had shown that being different was not a weakness but a strength. And he had found love in the most unexpected place. The story of humanity and the Velshara was just beginning. There would be difficulties and disagreements ahead. Cultural differences would cause confusion. Political tensions would arise. But they had built something solid: mutual respect, genuine friendship, and a shared commitment to facing the universe together. That was enough to build a future on.